We have an established industry leader and owner of his own practice. As a partner to multi-platinum, Grammy Award-winning hip-hop artist Lil Jon, Emperor Cersei of Atlanta's Hot 107.9 Morning Show, and Rob McDowell for record label BME Recordings, we present to you Vince Phillips. How are you?
How are you?
Great to meet you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to turn on your mic for you.
Hello, 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 hello. Greetings.
To start this off, please tell us how you got into the music industry.
So I've been in the music industry for a few years now. Got into the music industry in the 90s as it was sort of a new scene in Atlanta at that time. I was sort of around it, just so happened that I was always around what was going on in the early scene, partially because my group of friends, we threw parties. So in that association of friends, it was two guys that were DJs. One was Lil Jon and the other one was Emperor Cersei. This is before John was an artist. He was a DJ. So we would throw different events around the city, and that grew into us being asked to help promote clubs and help record companies get songs started in Atlanta. And so by that association, we were able to see the first of that wave of Atlanta that came around the early 90s. Dallas Austin, Jermaine Dupri, LaFace, as they were starting to work their records, we were right there in the mix. And what was most interesting to me was seeing people like Jermaine, who was, our age or maybe like a year younger, take off, right? Start off with an independent artist and the record take off, and we were able to see guys go from, struggling along with everybody else to very successful. So that was sort of my first entry into the record business without us really being in it, officially yet.
Were you practicing law at the time?
No, not at all. So this was essentially coming out of high school and going in my college years. And when I went to Georgia State University, and in my particular circle, I was the only guy that went to college in my high school circle. And so by me going to Georgia State, I had a little bit of a little bit of information that the rest of the crew didn't have per se. What was going on campus, the fact that they were bringing in DJs to or different people to do entertainment for people on the campus at the break. The fact that student governments pay for those people, things like that. So I kind of brought a different aspect in, and in that collegiate side, and we all started, like Georgia State students do, we started hanging around the AU Center as well, and making ourselves known over there.
So what role does entertainment law play in the music industry?
So to kind of finish that story, I guess, I by the time I was graduating Georgia State, the music industry looked like something that could really be worth giving it a shot. Also, as they always tell you when you're in school, have something to fall back on. And so, I said, well, look, I'll go to law school, continue on. I've already graduated undergraduate. At very least, I have this as an attorney to fall back on, just the way that we all think of it as law. But separately, I realized that, I was already taking on a business role, sort of a really business aspect with everybody on my team, and other people were starting to come to me to take on business roles for them. So it was like a quasi-management type attitude that people were treating me with, just for advice, guidance, direction, and And so I decided to go to law school, and while I was in law school, a lot of things started to happen, and some of the biggest records came out right as I was, finishing law school. So I was able to put a record out. We were able to put our first record out, which was "Shawty Swing My Way." We released a Little John independent record called "Who You With." Artists that were near us were starting to get a buzz, like Pastor Troy and Youngbloods. And so it was sort of a new sound that was happening in Atlanta. Atlanta had been known for the bass music scene, and then Outkast was really like a true Southern hip hop. But what John and Pastor Troy and some of these other artists was doing was, just sort of different. It was undefined, and ultimately they came up with the phrase. John started using the word crunk so much they called it crunk music. But to answer your question, like I said, people were coming to me for business direction, guidance, and along with that, it kind of naturally flowed into what I do as an attorney. So, what the role of an entertainment attorney is to protect and to number one, protect the client from a business standpoint, and to attempt to make the client's business most profitable from a financial standpoint, or from a ownership standpoint, or from a what rights that you might retain or own, or if you're going to be assigning rights to somebody, how to get it the most you can for those assignments. Maybe keep the term of those assignments as short as possible. And so it's really a fiduciary relationship where you are going to give your knowledge to somebody who doesn't have that particular knowledge, because there's a lot of twists and turns, especially in music, more so than even television. There's a lot of twists and turns in contracts in music just by the nature of copyright and performances, and then you got merchandise and touring. These are the kind of things that you don't see in television. A person gets on a television show, they're not doing merch as part of his deal. There's not publishing. You don't own the words that you say on television. You just a talent. There's a talent. There's a fee for that talent. There may be some back end participation, and a lot of it is controlled by SAG. So it gives you some nice, easy parameters. Within the music industry, it's like the wild, wild west. And so there's really a lot more work that has to be taken into consideration when you work for a client in music.
You touched on a lot of different points that we're all.
I know. Was I going too much?
No,
okay.
Not at all. Right? No, not at all. Okay.
And if I'm just going too much, just say something, and I'll stop and break it down.
Number one.
Okay.
Shawty Swing My Way.
That's
still my jam.
You like it?
That's number one. Of course. That's like my song. That
was amazing, because I always tell people it's amazing when the first song that you release does so well. And it gives you like this false idea that it's easy to do well. And so I think, it was a long time before we saw another platinum record. But shout out to KP and Envy. KP is my little sister. And you know how you do when you first get on or first get an opportunity. You're going to try to give it to your family. So that's my little sister.
That was a good one.
She was in a group with Rashida back then called the Capers. They were like 16 years old. Yeah.
But that song, though, you could have helped the Capers.
Well, you know what? The opportunity wasn't the Capers. The opportunity was a 2-girl song, and one of them had to sing. So, yeah. So, if one was going to rap, it was going to be my sister.
So off in the club on Friday night. Look, okay. Back to it. Okay, so with all these things with entertainment law, and once again, we're glad that you're even here to offer this experience, and it's not just just some random attorney here just to talk. Like he obviously in the music industry.
Yes.
But how do, and maybe this was something that even as you were coming up outside of school. How do we keep updated with entertainment law and news? Like, are there magazines or like websites, blogs? Like
publications. Well, first of all, as an attorney, we have to do a certain amount of hours of continuing legal education. So for your CLEs, we go to conferences and such. They have some pretty major conferences like Meetum that goes on in France, and these opportunities where you get a chance to kind of see the decisions that are being made as they're being made. Obviously, the biggest, most recent stuff has to do with streaming and online consumption of music. So it's funny. Just a few years ago, a record. I put out the first Nene record, by the way. So I keep talking about records I put out. I represent people as an attorney. I have co-owned a record company with Lil Jon and Cersei and Rob. That was BME, and then occasionally I put out records to this day. Which the most recent one was the Nene in 2013. And I tell people that I kind of hate the timing of the record because although it did great, the deal for streaming today is so set and it's so crazy that just as recently as the We Are Tunes Nene, the streaming deals were not in place the same. So the kind of money that would be made right now with that same record is completely different from the money that was made 2013, 2014, right? So that's how fast things are really changing in this industry. So as far as keeping up, that there is a lot to keep up with. There is a fast pace going. The more it goes to technology, as we all know, technology moves probably faster than any other business right now. There are publications. I don't know if you guys are members of CSAC or ASCAP or BMI, but as members, you will get emails, and a lot of times they'll bring up important things that are going on that might look boring, but give it a read because it will talk about how they're lobbying to make changes, what they're pushing for, as far as what the cutting edge questions are for publishing. And then there's Billboard Magazine, and Billboard Magazine will have articles that talk about the latest deals and the latest happenings and what's going on in the music industry. So those are just two examples that come to mind. And then as an attorney, again, we have to go through hours of continuing legal education, whereby we sit in a room like this, a room full of entertainment attorneys, and it may be the guy that just closed the deal between, SoundCloud and Universal Music or something like that, and he'll talk about the aspects of that deal.
Did you just drop some tea?
Well, this happened a little while back, actually, so I guess it would have been tea a while back, but I guess, I don't know, it's one area that's not talked about a lot, but SoundCloud pays now, and you have to have your publishing straight. It's very interesting. It's very, publishing driven, but SoundCloud does pay to those who are set up to be monetary in the SoundCloud system. Yeah.
We have it. We're gonna get back to that, but
Okay.
You guys hear me? Okay.
Me too?
It just sounded a little low.
Okay.
Yeah, your voice sounds great. I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was a little low. So you said Meetum. Mm-hmm. It's a conference.
Yes. In France.
And they have, I guess, platforms now. Like if you don't go to the conference in France.
If you don't go, you actually can watch it now.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it is on YouTube even right now. Because I was even saying I need to go back and watch certain ones. I heard some really good conversations. And so what they'll have is something like this, a sit-down conversation. And it would be with, people who've just struck some of those major deals. And so as far as keeping up with what's going on right now, that would be a good thing. Go to YouTube, watch those, watch I Do Music. To be honest, right here in Atlanta with the I Do Music podcast, I don't know if you guys are into podcasts or not, but sign up for the Patchwerk I Do Music podcast. They come to your phone, you get a conversation, you get to hear from different people who have done, they range from musicians who have gone from, nowhere to superstar musicians, right? To attorneys like myself, to the producers, the artists, and so you'll get a chance to really hear what's going on through those.
So now you came in the industry with, I guess you could say, superstar clients. So
Well, they weren't superstars yet.
okay, so how does your law firm choose clients now? Like, is it based on talent? Like, do you see something in them? Is it like a social media presence?
It's a couple of things, really. You know, I have learned more recently. I'm consider myself a pretty good fan. I've always seemed to like music that turned out to be, good music. But it's changing. I must admit, I'm getting a little older. So I was just telling a story that my son was doing some music, and I thought it sounded a little crazy a couple of years ago. I said, "This sounds like garbage," and and I was like, "You got to change this. If you want to make something hot, you got to change this." And then about a year later, I started hearing other artists that were pretty big. I'm not going to name anybody. And I said, well, dang, this is the same kind of music he was doing. I guess that my ear was just not keeping up with the times. And so I had to go back and tell him, look, maybe I was wrong. So I say that to say, I can't really just say I'm picking music because of what I like. But what I do look for is people who are willing to, that show me they have that drive, that seem to be really, truly, honestly interested to learn and listen, seem to really have that shot, and part of having that shot is that drive and that charisma and that personality and a good team. I'd like to see an artist that has a good team or a team that has a good artist. Obviously able to pay. And what else would I say? I guess that would be about it. Yeah. All right. And you know what? If you got a buzz going, it never hurts. That goes for you hear that for the major labels. That goes for almost anybody. Because if you got a buzz going, it's because you were able to get out there and work and grind and make something happen. And by the fact that I came from that sort of scene, it was, you could imagine when we first started pushing, a guy just yelling on records. People were like, what is this? And so, it was, give it to John, give it up to John. He was driven and hardworking and, and so, and our whole team was that. So it was, so I look for teams that remind me. And sometimes I say, you guys remind me of us. And that's always a good thing.
What?
Right.
If you guys can turn down your ringers, that'd be great. Just even if it takes a moment to go boop, 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 boop. Okay. So have you ever, or how do you, and have you ever had to deal with difficult clients and maybe like someone affecting, I guess, just using their free speech and affecting business deals or, any situations? Okay, so like I was watching TV. I don't know if you watch TV.
Okay.
You watch Being Mary Jane?
Sometimes.
Okay, so the girl that was on there, Niecy, got into a lawsuit. She wasn't allowed to say anything, so she got this money. And then she went off on Twitter and started talking about like, oh, da-da-da,
After she got the money.
Right, and then she had to give it all back.
Right.
Have you ever had to deal with
Not that
people
bad,
like that?
but I've had clients that, can't seem to not sabotage themselves. And it's just tough because it's hard for me to put my finger on why. Some people just have personality traits that are difficult. I've had clients that were more street than some corporations would be interested in working with, and so if they don't know how to contain their emotion, it will cause a company to back away from them or step away from working with them. I've had clients that were more too emotional with me, and I said, "Look, let's go ahead and part ways, and let me give you your retainer back, and we can just kind of take it from there." Or even clients that seem like they got all the answers, and so I say, "This is what I think you should do," and they say, "Well, well, this is what I think I should do. And I say, well, at a certain point, look, that's just my humble opinion. I happen to have sold records before, and I happen to have helped a lot of people. But, far be it from me to tell you that, you're wrong. So let's just part ways because I don't think we're a good fit,
Are you friends with any of those people still this day?
Some of the really passionate guys that I understand their passion, that's part of the reason I've said let's part ways. Because I'd rather, even though they may not have even been friends per se, they're associates that I know in the music industry, and I would say I'd rather keep them as good associates. If I don't think we mix, it would be better to keep them as good associates.
We will get to questions, I promise. So any questions that you guys have? Oh, I thought you were feeling the Holy Ghost here. So if you guys do have any questions, though, make sure you guys are writing them down because you will have your turn to get questions in. So can you explain the one legal service that most clients that come to you need?
For me, the thing that I see the most would be, the thing that the job that is most repetitive is producer agreements. It's music industry. It's based on acquiring songs. Once a person has signed an artist, maybe a record company or maybe a independent, they sign the artist. Okay, that's a one contract thing. After that, that particular artist is probably going to do, maybe they do a publishing deal. That's okay, one more publishing deal. After that, they're going to do God knows how many songs. And so what you're going to see is a producer agreement for each one of those songs. So they got, one artist deal, maybe two artist deals that they signed with an independent, and then the independent went to a major. Do a pub deal, maybe do a merch deal. But they're going to, if they're successful, they're going to buy hundreds of songs. So that would equate to me doing hundreds of producer agreements, unless they happen to be an artist that tends to work with like one producer or a small group of producers. And so the most common agreement that I see doing entertainment law is a producer agreement. And it's important. I can't tell you how many times someone has come to me and they didn't get their producer agreement taken care of in advance. And the song has started to take off because, this is Atlanta. We know that if you work hard and you do all those things we talked about earlier, you might end up catching a record that's taken off. And if you try to go back and get the business done after, it's always tougher. If you got a feature on that song, then there's a question of whose song it is, right? All of a sudden, the feature is telling people it's his song, and it's uploaded on YouTube with his name first. And he's trying to buy it from the producer. Or maybe even a record company who gets wind of the fact that you haven't handled your business and wants to make you sign with them, goes to the producer, buys the track. So it's very important to get your producer agreements done.
Interesting. So,
and don't let the producer decide he's going to stick you up, right? The producer might decide and guess what? It's his privilege. Nobody did a deal with him. So now the song is big and he wants $50,000 for the track when he was going to sell it to you for $500. So
30 for the lease.
Right.
Just saying. So how do individuals go about choosing legal representation for their brand?
I would say people choose their legal representation based on their personality and their needs. I suggest that people take a few meetings. Don't just go sit with one entertainment attorney because different people do different things with different personalities and style. Also, within the music scene, you may have someone who is more leans towards producer style. Someone else maybe more leans towards working with the labels. Someone else may have a more reputation for working with artists. But more so than that, you just want to make sure you got the personality that fits with you, and that they are available to the extent that you need their availability.
Interesting. So, because you've been on both sides. You've been on the side as the attorney, but you've also been on the label side. Mm-hmm. I know you can you describe the legal relationship between a manager and a talent and how both parties can be protected?
Okay, so the relationship between a manager and a talent is what you speaking of two people that really need to connect. That's even more so than the artist and the attorney, because your manager is your day-to-day person who really helps you pick and choose the light and direction that best suits your success, but also best suits your personality and who you are. Because you may have a manager who says to you, I don't think you should do this type of music. And really, maybe it's true that this other type of music might be a successful type of music, but it just might not be you. So you want to get a manager who understands you. You want to get a manager who gets you and who actually believes and agrees with what you do, as opposed to one who is going to try to take you in a direction that is not where you're going. And then separately, you want someone who you believe in their vision of style, their vision of culture, their vision of what success looks like. And lastly, you want one with relationships. You want one who can help you get to the things that you're looking for, whether it is touring opportunities or in-studio opportunities, or if you're a producer, relationships to get you to an artist to sell your beats. You want somebody who has some relationships, as opposed to somebody who is kind of just learning alongside you. If you have someone that's learning alongside you, then he needs to be open and willing to get advice and guidance from somebody else.
Interesting. So I saw, I want to say this was yesterday, the days run into each other, but I was looking on Twitter and some person screenshotted a piece of a contract where they were, and of course it was going mini viral, and they were saying that the manager had the ability to get life insurance in the artist's name or for the artist, and they pretty much had to go along with it. Right. And stuff. Do you see things like that often?
Yeah, more again recently. That was almost in all the contracts years ago. Kind of went away for a while. I'm starting to see it again. It's a weird kind of clause, when you see it, and here's the take on it. On one side is the concept or the idea that someone can benefit from your death, right? And, we've had those kind of rumored stories in the past of artists that were killed and things like that, that caused people to have questions and became sensation even into some fictional stuff. We'd see some TV shows and movies that depicted these ideas, that a record company would thrive off of the death of an artist. And so that the concept of that is a weird thing. If you take that off the table and make it, more pure at heart, then there is the idea that a company depends on a person for a certain income stream. And so if that person dies, they no longer have that income stream. And as long as they pay for the insurance itself, then who is it to say that is, that they can't have some insurance for this person? That is how they, let's say you're a manager and that's your only artist and you spend all your time on that one artist, and that person goes, then your life,
time and money,
your life, you will have to move and you will have to, change your whole life because you concentrated so heavily on this one person, and you've made it to a place where you and this person are making significant money, and now this person is just no longer here. Well, there's no making up that. If that's your only client, then yeah, your financial life is over. So that I won't say that I fall on one side or the other. I just give you those two examples of theories about it.
Do you think, and just to piggyback off of that, do you think that with certain reputations that come with the hip hop industry, that's a certain clause that might come up more than in other instances?
I mean, when it was in a lot of agreements, it was there, period, and it was there for the same reasons I tell you. So hip hop is not the only area where a manager recognizes that if this person dies, that was my significant stream of income.
Right.
If Taylor Swift was your only artist and she died, you would lose your money too. So you might want that as well, right? So it's not a hip hop thing. The hip hop thing is probably more the concern of the sensational stories that we've heard in the past, and the concept of, could a record company do away with somebody to make money from the insurance policy. For me, and for many things as an attorney, my position, it goes with the client. So the reason I can't tell you where I particularly stand is because I understand the point of view from either way. Right. And if an artist is my client and he says, I don't want that in there, then we're fighting to take it out. Right. If an artist is a man, my client is the manager and he's like, I got to have this, man, before I put this much time, effort, I'm going to fight to keep it in. Right. That's my job, is to be a hired gun for whatever the position is that best suits the client.
Okay, cool. So as the music industry transitions, and I know we covered this a little earlier, into a more digital age, can you explain the importance of artists protecting their brands legally now?
More and more you see the industry becoming, the existence of an artist in the music industry is bigger than them as in music. And so we're starting to see artists really becoming fully associated with the brand that they sort of represent. And by brand, I don't mean necessarily a product, but by the character of the branding that goes around the character that they present. So to the extent that an artist is known to be wholesome and child friendly, he's got to protect that brand. To the extent, also, even on the other side, that an artist is known to be street and gangster, he's got to protect the brand for what that is. So, and there become multiple income streams that work for you in any space. It used to be that if someone did smoke marijuana, people would say, well, you might want to stay away from that because you're going to limit your financial opportunities. But now you have Wiz Khalifa with a rolling paper, and you have Snoop with whatever he might have. So rolling paper, right? Or blunt or something. So there's multiple mainstreams of incomes. Another person might be into the counter, like a skateboard culture, and so you want to protect what that is so that you can maintain, I guess what you would call where the people of that culture itself consider you to be honestly a part of it, and not just in it for financial gain. And so that causes you to be protective of your brand.
Okay, so how have things changed in the legal world of entertainment since streaming got popular?
Well, I would say that we have to identify. We have new paragraphs in our contracts, things that weren't in the contract before. Contracts are ever evolving, when we went to law school, we learned the story of when the CDs came about. There was once there was a moment where it was when DVDs came about. There was a moment where the film industry was transferring all the films into DVDs, and the contracts that they had at that time didn't really take into account the fact that films could go into other areas. And so there's a line now that's in all contracts that says we can use this music in all medium now known or which is ever invented in the future, right? Because at that time they had to go back to every song that was in every movie and re-clear these songs for DVD. So they'll never make that mistake again, because now there's this line that says, again, for any form of device that is ever created. So now what we see in our contracts that are new are concerns about sound exchange, whether or not a person will be afforded to a share in the sound exchange, especially in producer agreements. We see, with YouTube and some of these other places, especially in the independent moment of a record, whether or not the producer still has a stake in the master or in the income from the YouTube play on the master and things like that. And that's also partially because the publishing doesn't pay as well in those streaming spaces yet. We've heard the complaints of these huge songs and the amount of play that they get in streaming and the small amount of publishing income that is being earned. But there is a large amount of money that's being earned on the master side. So if you're a producer, you're only in the publishing space, then you're held to that smaller income stream from the streaming. But if you can get certain language in your agreement concerning the master side or master side income, then that you'll be able to participate in the larger pie.
Okay. So two things out of that for anyone who's, maybe on the 101 side. What is Sound Exchange?
Okay, so Sound Exchange is a company that collects on the streaming side now. And interestingly enough, it pays to master and performer, which is so different from what we know of publishing, which pays to the song itself. And by saying paying to the song means it pays to the writers of the song. And so when a song is played on a streaming space, digital play, Sound Exchange collects for that play, similar to what you know as ASCAP or BMI collects for the terrestrial radio play and that sort.
Okay, and you're saying on the master side, you get more money on the master side. What does that mean?
But this kind of comes down to those deals that we talked about. So you saw that the major record companies were really took hold to the negotiations. And if you remember, there were times when there was no Universal music on YouTube. And it was actually during the time of Soulja Boy, who was on Interscope, which is owned by Universal. So that was an interesting moment, but maybe to some degree, Soulja Boy was a great tool for them to use at that moment, because YouTube surely did not want to take down all the Soulja Boy videos. That was one of their, this was as YouTube was a growing company, and that was one of the marquee songs that had the videos, and people were doing the dances to it. So one by one, the major labels did deals with the major streaming companies, and in working out those deals, they worked out deals that were really best for them because they own the masters, and they were ahead of the publishing companies in their same effort. So on the master side is the owner of the actual master recording, as opposed to the publishing side, which is the owner of the composition. Does that make sense? Do y'all know what those differences are?
Somebody said no in the back.
So I describe a master versus composition as this: when you buy, let's say you buy a CD, a physical CD of a song, you've really bought two things. You bought the master itself, and you bought the song inside of the master. Well, what's the song inside of the master? I could sing a song right now. You guys could say, that's it. That's the version we want. Let's mix that. I could go in tomorrow and sing it again. It's not going to sound exactly the same. So I'm singing the same song, but that version that we did today is the master we chose. Tomorrow, when I sing it, maybe I got a cold, maybe something, it sounds a little different, right? It's not exactly the same. That's a new master of the same song, right? If I sing the song 5 times for 5 days, I would have 5 masters but one song. Does it make sense? Okay. So the song itself is the publishing. That's what the publishing is held in the song, in the composition. And the master is that day that you said, this is it. So when you record a song and finish and mix it and say, this is it, Universal has it, and Universal owns that master. And then they have clauses in the contract that says to the artist, don't re-record this song. And there's a clause in the producer agreement that says, don't re-record this song. So otherwise, the producer could go and start, make it again. They'd have to start over from scratch, but they'd make a new master, right? You could lay the same drum pattern, lay the same guitars. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it would be a new master of that song. And so with Universal or Sony or Warner or any of these record companies are selling a particular record, they're selling the master. So they're selling that. Because when you hear it on streaming, you don't hear that one that got done the next day. You only heard that one that we chose today, the master. But you're also hearing the composition. And so ASCAP, BMI, CSAC are fighting to get more money for the song because they collect for songwriters. They collect for songwriters on the song. But Universal, Sony, Warner, they own the masters, and they're fighting to get as much money as they can for those masters. And then all the independent labels, I just use them as the example, but the big companies and the independent companies that own masters are searching to get as much money as they can on the master side. Make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Good. That was also something, just spoiler alert, you do talk a little bit about that in your podcast interview on the I Do Music podcast as well. So if you guys haven't checked that out on SoundCloud, definitely do, because everything that we're talking about here is not in the podcast. So it's a lot more other information. So we talked about this, the SoundCloud, and what is your, more insight on the websites like SoundCloud and Spinrilla and with streaming music and how they're compensating artists?
Well, Spinrilla is actually the last Wild West company out there. And so it'll be interesting to see. I hope that Spinrilla can stay around, and it's going to be interesting because pretty sure they'll be coming for them soon. And they're a small company. So we'll see what happens. But what was your question?
No, it was just insight on, just where they are with streaming music and compensating artists. And, of course, like I said before.
Well, SoundCloud recently laid off a bunch of people.
Right.
And we're hoping that they make it through, because I still think that SoundCloud is an important place for people to discover music. And it's also a place where independent artist is, I think people are more apt to look for an independent artist on SoundCloud. Although smaller artists are available on Spotify and Pandora and the other streaming services, I think the culture of listeners is to look for more independent style music on SoundCloud, because that's kind of where it started. SoundCloud was, completely free for longer. So they actually have a larger user base. Initially, they had a larger user base than the other ones. And I hope that we continue to have as many choices as we do. So when you think about it, you have your Apple Music, you have your Spotify, you have Jay-Z's company, you have SoundCloud, and to a large degree, people even go to YouTube just to let music play, even if they were not watching the videos. So you have a lot of choices to consume music through, and each one is a little different. And I think that's good. I think it's good to have that competition in the market. You're starting to see real competition between Apple Music and Spotify, and ultimately it's a competition to get good content out to the listeners. And at the same time, they end up helping the content owners, because in their effort to gain more listeners, they're looking for creative things to provide to the listener, which also become almost like little marketing campaigns that help the artists. One of my clients, Ayo and Teo, these guys were really big on Spotify. 100 million plays for this song "Rolly," and Spotify was really helpful to them in many aspects, because they wanted to stay ahead of Apple Music. So they recognize that this is a song that a certain base is really into. They're going to go the extra effort to help that base continue to find it, put it on playlists and things like that nature. And the playlists sort of help give a character or a brand to the artist. Some of the playlists lean more hip hop. Some of the playlists lean more street. And so once you get put into a certain playlist, it also helps the user identify what the artist represents within a branding space.
You said those were your clients?
Yes.
So that's another recent big win.
What's that?
That's another big win, like recent
That's another
big win
big win.
outside
Yes,
of
absolutely.
the Nene thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, from a client standpoint, I got some good clients who are doing well now. Kevin Gates is a client. NBA Youngboy is a client. On the news side, we have on the producer side, we have Molly Raw, who produces Uzi Vert. Used to be Burberry Perry, now is the Good Perry, who produces a lot of stuff for Yachty. So a lot of up and coming, new people that I'm happy to work with.
Burberry Perry, did he change that because for legal reasons?
He did. Burberry, the company, sued him.
Okay. At what level do you have to get to for someone to sue you for using their name?
Yeah, I don't think they would have noticed him if he hadn't done this song with one of these Kylie Jenner. So he did a song with Kylie Jenner. And
because we all know everyone's waiting to throw a lawsuit at her at any moment. But go ahead.
And that was just on SoundCloud, but it blew up huge on SoundCloud. And from that, I'm sure that's what caught their attention.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the real problem wasn't so much just the name. It probably was the name, but also that the cover photo was his face in front of the Burberry print. And so they were able to say, no, we are sure you're talking about us. Right.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, great. Okay, so really we have 10 minutes. So contracts, any major things to look for with signing a major deal, and any alternatives to, any things you need to look forward to signing a major deal, and the pros and cons to signing one.
Well, okay, and this day and age, the question of signing to a major deal, and I won't even say this day and age, it's always been a big question, whether or not you should stay independent or sign to a major. Normally that question comes as a matter of finance. Normally it's a matter of money, whether or not you really can afford to continue to maintain as an independent. Even as recently as when I did the Nene record, you are constantly feeding a hit record. When you have a hit record, you're going to have to continue to put money into that record to continue to make it grow, right? And it's always sort of a balancing act to find the moment where you can stop and let it sell. And years ago, we were independent with Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. We were independent for several years and ultimately chose to take a deal. That that support staff, that team was certainly once upon a time more needed than it necessarily is today, with so much available from a streaming aspect, the ability to do certain things that used to cost so much money now with just a push of a button. I tell people once upon a time we had to, load our records into mailers and send them out in the mail just to get it to a DJ. And now you just put all the DJs' names into your Gmail and then push send, and they all got the song. Or you can, pay a service one flat fee, and they'll send it out to DJs for you. So when you're doing a major label deal, number one, again, it's that question of whether or not it's a matter of money. But when you're doing it, you want to ask certain questions. You want to know, how long is this deal for? And normally that's going to be described in terms of records as opposed to in terms of years. So how many albums am I signing up for? What is the compensation that they're giving me for the first project, and what is the compensation that they're giving me ongoing for the future projects? What is their how much are they going to give for the recording budget? How much are they going to support you financially for recording the project? What sort of marketing dollars are they willing to commit? Are they committing to a music video? Are they requiring copyright in the publishing? Are they requiring just an income participation in the publishing as opposed to the copyright? Are they requiring participation in your touring, your shows, on your endorsements, on your merchandise? What is my royalty for the sale of this record? What is my royalty for the sale of those other areas such as merchandise? So those are kind of like some of the broad strokes of the things that you would be asking. You guys take this down. I'm actually launching an app that will be useful to many of you, and the app is called Walla.legal, and it's www.legal. And the way that's going to work is for people in entertainment, and that's for music, television, photographers, talent of all sorts. It kind of would allow you to quickly knock out just the main points of certain agreements and get certain understandings done right then. And then you can come to an attorney with that and add the longer terms that are necessary. So for a person in the studio, there's no attorney around. You want to make sure that you got an understanding of who owns that track. Then you would open up the app, and the app will say, who produced the track, who's buying the track, how much you're paying them, are you giving them a royalty, and it's going to give you a contract, and both of you guys can sign, and it'll send a PDF out to both parties. If there's a side artist, there'll be a side artist agreement on there that each person can put in the names and sign off on, and you can walk out of there feeling assured that you're safe. You don't have to walk out nervous about whether or not some of those earlier pitfalls we talked about could happen.
So make sure you guys keep that down. I guess our last couple questions I'm going to couple together, which they're all pretty much the same. What does trademark protect? What does copyright protect? And what is, copyright infringement? And when do you need these things?
Okay. So you said trademark first. So trademark is it's a little bit more complicated than copyright. And because trademark is the concept behind trademark is to protect consumers. And then the person who has the mark gets protection sort of because of that protection for the consumers. Meaning they don't want people going into the store thinking they're buying one thing and they got something else. So I've seen like a blue jean on the shelf that looked very similar. I know what it was. It was Rockaware at one point. It looked very similar to Rocker Republic, right? And I said, man, this is really kind of like trading on some trademark lines here. But the idea is that you don't want people thinking they bought Rocker Republic and they got Rockaware, or the other way around. And so to get a trademark, the first thing you have to do is actually show the trademark office that you actually have used the mark in commerce. And then they're going to ask questions to make you identify the fact that someone identifies this mark with you. So if you see a wavy soda bottle with a cursive writing on it, people associate that with Coca-Cola. So, they would easily be able to say people associate that with Coca-Cola. And so that, you don't have to prove that some huge amount of people recognize it, but just that you use the mark in commerce and that people recognize the mark. Copyright, on the other side, is actually just as it says, it's the copyright. And sometimes people say, they say, I have that copy written, and they think it's like copyright, like to write, but it's not that sort of right. It's right as in who has the right to copy this? Who has the right to? Let's go back to music. Who has the right to make copies of this song? Let's go back to CD days. Who could burn 1,000 CDs and sell them? Right. That's copies being made. Who has the copyright? If it's a piece of art on a shirt, who has the copyright? The right to continue to make that shirt with this piece of art on the front. And so in that, you may have a copyright that reaches to the level of a trademark. If that becomes so connected to you, to your brand, I would say that, maybe the polar bear might have been a polar bear shirts might have started off as a copyright and became like a little trademark for Coca-Cola as well, right? Because people do associate that. But the copyright itself is who has that right to copy, and it's easier to acquire a copyright because you would just say that these people signed an agreement with me. Either you say I wrote it, it's my song, I wrote it, and I have the copyright, and the copyright actually exists the moment you finish the song. You do need to file your copyright, but the concept of the copyright exists at the moment the song is finished, right? If two people wrote it, they own it. If y'all don't do a split sheet, then you own it equally. If four people wrote it and y'all don't do a split sheet, you own it 25 apiece. But normally people go back and kind of divide it up based on their contribution, considering music to be half of the writing contribution and the top line lyric or word to be the other half of the contribution. So 50-50 on music and words usually for the copyright of the composition. And back to the other thing, the copyright exists in two ways: copyright in the master, copyright in the composition. And so you would notice a line in the work for hire phrase in your contracts that may say you assign over all copyright to the master and composition. That's where the attorney should say strike out composition, because if you sign that, that means you gave away your publishing. Strike out the composition and just say I give you the copyright in the master. I will retain the copyright in the underlying composition, right? So when a song is done and complete, really two copyrights become in existence. The copyright in the master, whereby the record company can continue to copy that song and sell it, and then the copyright in the publishing.
Okay, so this one last thing, because I really don't want to end it just like that.
Okay.
What is your proudest accomplishment?
Oh, wow. I would say that I was very proud when we were a part of creating like a genre of music or a sound or a thing. So in working with BME, when they added the word crunk in the dictionary, we were like, wow, we actually were a part of something that like literally changed culture, and to the point that not on like the Wikipedia, like in Webster's dictionary, the word got added, and it was like a big deal. Like this word was added to the words added this year, crunk, and we were like, really? So that's kind of something that you could point to years later, to grandkids and say we got a word put into the dictionary. So that was probably a big accomplishment.
That's awesome. Well, let's give a round of applause for Vince Phillips and the extensive knowledge that he's given us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I wanted to know what was the legal process as far as like, is it on? I want to know what the legal process was for like J. Cole and Bryson Tiller to use the Shawty Swing My Way sample.
So when we did that record, we did it on Elektra Records, and Elektra is owned by Warner. Things that are owned by Warner, when they reach a certain age, they go into this catalog company that they have called Rhino. And so when someone wants to sample a record from catalog, they go to the Rhino Records. And then Rhino disperses on the master side money based on the contract between those of us who are engaged in creating the master and the initial side. So they go there for the clearance on the master side. And then separately, they got to go to the songwriters and clear, once again, right, this concept. This is the main concept of today, the master and the composition. So once they clear the master, then they also have to clear the composition. Did we do that song here at the old Patchwerk? Shawty Swing My Way? I think we did some of it here, yeah. At the old Patchwerk. Rhythm and quad. We were known for trying to make types of music. So, before there was crunk, there was rhythm and quad. Rhythm and quad was a mixture of R&B and bass. So My Boo, Carmo and all that, and Shawty Swing My Way, and we had a whole album of it that we did. But for that particular record, that's what they had to do to clear the song. And another record that has come from my company that has been sampled quite a bit has been the Crime Mob, Knuck If You Buck. Yeah, so again, the kids, Zay and Zayon, clients of mine, also did the Juju on the Beat record. Yeah, on the Knuck If You Buck.
Good morning. My name is Lindsay Dason. I'm a junior business major with a concentration in marketing at Clark Atlanta University from Baltimore, Maryland. And the question I have for you today is, can you talk about, just in depth about a 360 deal?
So when we were talking about what to look for in your recording agreement, I kind of touched on that when I mentioned to look for whether or not they want to participate in your publishing, participate in your merch, participate in your endorsements, and participate in your touring. So that's what they call a 360. And it's an interesting thing because it was born out of, I would say it was born out of a necessity for the record companies to continue to exist at one point. I don't know how much that necessity is still the same, because now that they've gotten a hold of streaming and are able to make money from streaming, it's not like it was at the time that everybody was saying, I don't know what the record companies are going to do. Essentially, there was a period where record companies were paying for all the recording, marketing, promotion, but the one thing that nobody was paying for was the record, right? Everybody was getting it free from free downloads, and they had not been able to get a hold to the streaming or the real download game yet. And so in order to continue to exist, they realized that the artists were making money in all these other spaces without them. The show money, the publishing money from the radio play, which they felt like they helped create the radio play. They felt like it wouldn't be shows if they hadn't, paid for the marketing. They felt like it probably wouldn't be a merch deal if these things hadn't happened. And now you got a Coca-Cola commercial, now you got a Adidas sponsorship. They feel like that wouldn't have happened. So they wanted to participate in all these areas of income. And they coined, and the industry coined the phrase 360 deal for that. So I don't see the majors letting go of the 360 anytime soon, because now that they got their teeth locked in on it, that's sort of like a standard part of the deal. So my job when representing an artist is really to try to get it out, and I've been successful on occasion with the major label. But when I can't, then I do things to try to minimize either their participation in the 360 or create shelters. So for me, a shelter would be before you start participating in touring, you let the artist make the first $100,000, and then you can participate. And that would be for every album cycle. What I might say, and they may say they want to co-publish and take a part of the copyright. If I can't get them completely away from the publishing, I may say, well, don't take copyright. We'll give you an income participation. And the difference between having the copyright and the income participation, my example is if you have a car. It's one thing to say we co-own the car. It's another thing to say it's my car, but you can drive it sometimes. So that's my example I use for clients to kind of understand. Owning the copyright meaning they own the car with you. The other way around is it's still your car, and they participate in the money that the car can make for a period of time. So things like that are the kind of ways that I try to, lessen the hurt on the artist side from a 360. If I represent an independent label, I'm coming for the 360. I want to get it. The independent label is going to put a lot of money out there to get the artist up and going. A lot of times they're spending money to get the shows going and things of that nature. And so if my client's the independent label, he wants the 360, I'm going to fight to get it.
How you doing? I'm Dion from Harlem, New York. Appreciate you being here. I just have a question as an upcoming artist manager. It's kind of two parts. What advice do you have? I know you're talking about, if you're dealing with somebody new, because they might not have all the relationships, but we have to start somewhere. So with that being said, as I'm hustling and grinding in this business, then what advice do you have for an upcoming artist manager? And then when should we acquire or obtain an entertainment lawyer when dealing with artists?
So I would say what you want to do is this game is very relationship oriented. It's about as much relationship oriented as it is talent oriented, as much as it is anything else. So people they underestimate the talent of doing business. Like that's a talent itself, and the talent of doing business is again as important as the talent of being a talent. So you have to look at yourself as that, like a person who is out to secure business, to make business happen. Be careful because under certain rules, a manager is not supposed to procure employment. That is an agent's job, but that's a long story. So just know that you should be creating opportunity as much as possible. Be a pleasure to do business with, and try to be someone that people who bring opportunities to the artist will gladly want to work with that artist, because of you, through you, and maybe even more because he's got such a great management team. Reach out for advice, guidance, and assistance as much as possible. Get help from people who've been around longer. A seasoned attorney would be good because a seasoned attorney can give you sort of the, extra information, extra guidance, extra direction that you might need. And that's why I kind of left that statement the way I did at the end when I said, if you're new, just get some help, because I know people who have basically a homeboy manager, but I like the way they work. I like the way that they ask questions. They follow up, they're on point. And I can't say that this person should get rid of that manager because he's new. I think that manager is doing all the right things to get himself into certain, situations and he is open for the bigger manager, if the bigger manager comes along, to participate and share, because you may have 20%. 10% of something bigger could be more for you than 20% of something smaller. So, if you can make him big enough to get someone who has more relationships on board, then that kind of works too.
And so with that being said, per se, are you you're a hub in a sense. So are you kind of selling off your artists, or are you, because if say your artist, the label says that we want to mess with them, or per se another manager comes into play like that, bigger and whatnot. Sometimes I've seen people get pushed out more or less, and I think that's lack of loyalty to the artist, maybe. But.
Yeah, I mean, artists will hurt you. Artists sometimes they're driving, trying to make it. They want to get there, and so sometimes they'll do those sorts of things. You want to work with somebody who you guys have a real trust for each other, and that is genuine and real. If the artist if you have a contract and your contract is solid, even if you get pushed out, if the artist makes money, you will be able to sue on your contract. So you would be able to, look, you can't force someone to accept your advice and guidance. If someone doesn't want to accept your advice and guidance and direction, what can you do but try? But if you have a contract with that person and the person goes on to make millions and they breach the contract, then you sue on the contract for breach.
Hello, my name is Mr. Fat. I'm an artist, recording artist, hip hop. I have two questions actually. So the first one is, do you actually yourself shop deals for clients? And the second question is, when you mentioned earlier that the word crunk was put in the dictionary, did you all get any compensation for it?
Okay, so I don't say that I shop deals. But I do say that I make sure that record companies are aware of my clients when it's time for them to be aware. So if I have a client that's starting to make a buzz, get known, or has something really special going on, A&Rs often call me, and before we get off the call, every single one of them says, "Is there something I should know about? What's going on?" Because when they hear something big was my client, they always call and say, "Vince, why didn't I know about this? Come on, man. Why can't I have a shot to be in the deal on this?" So because of that, I say, well, look, you got to be proactive. When I tell you about something, you got to jump on it. So, well, is there anything I need to be looking up? And I'll say, you on your computer? All right, go on YouTube and look at ... So if that's shopping, I guess I shop. But really, I just make sure that the record companies are aware. As far as when crunk got added to the dictionary, no, we did not get compensation. And it's an interesting thing because we actually initially had owned the word crunk, and we made a conscious effort to let it go because when you have a trademark, the other side of a trademark is unless you have a whole lot of money, it can't grow. Because you have to stifle it. You have to stop people from using something. You have to say, crunk is ours. You can't say crunk. You can't use crunk. You can't use crunk. And if that would have happened, really it would have just been our little word, I guess. So, the other side of it was if we wanted it to be truly big, we had to let the world have it,
That's deep. My name is Phoenix Soul. I'm a singer-songwriter and host here in ATL. I got two questions for you as well. What are steps into moving into music licensing for usage on television and film? And what's your advisement for artist longevity and diversifying our brands to monetize?
Okay, I'm gonna have you ask the second one again because I started thinking about the first one while you were talking.
Okay.
So as far as getting your music licensing going, Atlanta's become a great town for that. We have the film and television happening here. Shows like Atlanta really made an effort to have true, I guess underground music on there. I got calls for requests for licenses on songs that I wouldn't have ever expected to get calls on because they weren't songs that made it to major status, but they were big records in Atlanta. So I recognized that the music supervisor was charged with finding real records, for Atlanta for that show. But it's good to get to know music supervisors as best possible. If this may sound far-fetched, but you'd be surprised how reachable music supervisors are. If you watch movies, that name pops up on the screen every time. Take it down. Now with things like LinkedIn, you can look somebody up. You can pretty much, if their email address isn't there, you can look at their company. You can figure out the style of the emails in that company. Like, is it first name dot last name, or is it, figure out the style of emails and just email the person. And you can, actually reach people. What they often are looking for are things that are easy to clear. Mm-hmm. So songs that are, don't have a whole lot of different writers on them, or if they are different writers, the writers are together. If you get a reputation for having music that's easy to clear, that reputation spreads, because it is tough sometimes for a music supervisor. A director will pick a song. A director will say, I want this. They look that song up, and either it's like a classic that costs so much money that, they say, well, the master side is going to be expensive, and the master side and the composition side normally mirror each other. So if it's going to be $50,000 on the master side, it's going to be another $50,000 on the publishing side. And so the music supervisor normally then starts to look for something that feels the same. And they actually put the word out there to people, and through your ASCAP or BMI rep, if you let them know that you are doing this, you could let them know, because they do put the word out. I'm looking for something that feels like DMX, Lose My Mind. It's got to be really high energy and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going to see if I can get the director to kind of get his mind off of this expensive song and put this song in. It's going to feel the same for him. And so two things: known to be easy to clear, but known to be able to genuinely make the sound or type of music that they're looking for. So it is sometimes tough, from what I hear, for them to get good, genuine hip hop, because the people who do hip hop for movies are kind of corporate, and so they might not make what people call genuine rap music. And the guys that make the most genuine rap music, well, they work all night and sleep all day. And these guys, they do need people to be available in the day. They are business hour people. And sometimes something has to change or happen pretty quickly, and they're not really interested in having to wait till that night to make that contact. So, those are just some of the things to think about. But also, there are websites that you can put your music on now for licensing. And I don't have any off the top of my head, but there are a few of them out there. You can look them up, and you put your songs in there. Very similar to, have you ever seen the sites where you can pull photos from? And so it's the stock photo sites where you could pay an amount. You put your music on these particular sites, and it's music that the music directors, the music supervisors often look for stuff on there and pull it and buy it.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. And the other question was, what's your advisement for artist longevity and diversifying our brands to monetize?
Longevity, I would say first, relationships. The biggest thing I've seen hurt artists is because you need so many people to continue to succeed in this business. When you put out a record, you need your team to really be on your side, left and right. And so to really succeed, you want to keep people happy with working with you. I've seen, and this starts right from the, on hip hop, it starts right with the DJ. I've seen artists who have made all the DJs in Atlanta say, I can't wait for him to come with his next record. I promise you I'm not going to play it, kind of thing. Because this person, I just don't like him. So, from a longevity standpoint, I think that you have to be willing to be that person that people enjoy working with. Don't be afraid to modify and change and grow. Don't ever be stuck because music changes. And so if you don't change, you're guaranteed not to have a real longevity because if you're only stuck with one sound, and unless you're somebody who rare enough, like a Sade or somebody who just puts out something every 10 years and just people can't wait for it and it's the same sound. And that's how many of those are there? Most time you got people who have to, just kind of grow with the ears of people. Yeah. So that would be the other thing I say. And diversify. As you see many recording artists reach a point where the hip hop is a youth oriented sound, as they are not as young as they were, but you're starting to see them in movies, you start to see them in television, you start to see them expand into other areas of earning income to use their celebrity.
Hey, how you doing, Vince? My name is Nico Tommy. I'm a music producer and rapper. I would like to know the process of dealing with underage artists, signing them.
Okay, so underage artists can be difficult for a number of reasons, but the main thing that you want to make sure that you do, as you know, an underage person does not have the capacity to sign a contract. And so when they sign, if they don't have parental assent, then that contract is voidable just at the whim of the talent. So what you would do is, number one, you'd have your contract, you'd add a producer's assent to the contract, you'd add a parental assent to the contract, where the parent signs off on the contract. And if you really want to be safe, you take it to court and you have the courts ratify that contract. And the reason I say if you really want to be safe is in Georgia, it's not pressured the same, but if your artist is in New York or California, places where they've had big celebrities over the years that were children and whose parents took all their money, essentially, they've got laws on the books. So if you sign with the major is going to be out of California or New York anyway. And at that point, doing a deal with the minor is going to require court approval. And part of that court approval is the creation of a special bank account called a Coogan account. And that account, the court would decide how much, 15 to 20%, will go into that account of all money that the young artist earns, so that even if mom and dad spend up the money, when they turn 18, there's a pot of money there still waiting for them.
Hey, how's it going? I have a couple of questions. The first is in regards to sample clearance. As a producer working with a, say, independent artist, if you have a situation where the artist wants or assumes the producer will either clear the sample or have the sample already cleared, or it's going to come out of the producer's budget, so to speak. I guess looking at it from an artist perspective, if representing an artist, it's the independent artist, so not dealing with a label. So they want to publish the record, but they have to get the sample cleared. Typically.
Well, I'll just jump in on that one right quick. That ultimately is not your obligation per se. I mean, first of all, hopefully you do a budget up front. A lot of people in hip hop don't do budgets up front. If you do a budget, then you should budget for the sample, right? And so again, the obligation of the payment is from the person who's going to own this song at the end of the day, which is the artist or the record company, the independent label. So if you're going to use a sample and you want to really do it the right way, you get some idea what the sample may cost, so you get an estimate, you make your budget, you shoot high, and you say, okay, this is how much I charge, because you don't want it to come out of your pocket. This is how much the sample will be. This is how much the studio time will be. This is how much the mixer is going to be. This is how much the engineer, right? You're going to come to Curtis. You're going to find out how much is the studio time, how much is the engineer, You're going to mix it here. Okay, what's that? And you give them a budget for the whole song, which will include the cost of the sample. And then if it goes over because let's say studio time went over because you didn't show up. Now, yeah, that comes out of your pocket, right? Because of your action. And it's got to be in the contract, right? Those are kind of things that we put in the contract. If I'm representing a producer, I put in language that says, due to his solely to his act. If I'm representing the label, I say, if we go over, and leave it vague. If it goes over, it comes out of your pocket. If I represent the producer, no. If it goes over due to my producer's actions,
Right. ...
right? So anyway, if it goes over there, then, or the sample costs more than you anticipated, then potentially that could come from you. So I don't know a lot of independents that are doing budgets. To be honest, I wish more of the artists on major labels were doing a budget per song. So it would make things a little easier sometimes. But go ahead for your second question.
Okay, my second question is on the producer side. If you're registering tracks for copyright, you're going through the copyright office. You've got the sound recording and you got the performing arts or PA. Because basically one is registering the sound recording or something master or that whatever that particular composition was, and the PA would be the underlying composition. Mm-hmm. If you were to register only the sound recording of a track, and then somebody comes and remakes it or something, or puts it out and you're not on it, how hard will it be to hold that up in court that you were the original owner of that?
Did you put the record out, or it never got put out?
It never got put out.
But you copyrighted well, first of all, I suppose if you're going to copyright the recording, you should go ahead and, if you're concerned about that, do the copyright in the composition. Unless you're not the writer. I mean, if you're not the writer, then that's not your concern. But you're the producer, so you're one of the owners in the composition. To a large extent, you have a prima facie proof that you were first, even because you copyrighted the recording, the master. So if it sounds the same, I mean, when you do a copyright, you have to send in the song.
Right.
So if someone makes the same song, and you've done a copyright in the master, it's going to be obvious that they made the same record.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
If you're going to sue on it, I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
Good morning. Lane White. I just have a quick question about streaming. I was wondering, does the streaming count as soon as your track is clicked on, or is there a certain amount of time that has to be played?
I don't know, actually. That I don't know. That's something we're finding out. I would assume that it's got to play for, some amount of time. I don't think as long as radio, but, I would think that it has to play for some amount of time, but that's worth finding out. Do you know? It might be. It's worth finding out.
The same thing as like YouTube videos. You gotta have it on like 30 seconds.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah. That's my name, Patchwerk. I got a question. All right. So as far as for a producer, what if you got a song out with somebody that's signed to a label like Epic, but you never got the split sheets for it?
Did the song come out?
Yeah, it's out.
And you're so. Is this? Did anyone register the record, ASCAP or BMI or anywhere?
It's registered, but it's not registered with me or anything. It's like it's not even a split. So how would I like? How?
So you're being you. They have listed other people. Did they listed 100%? Like someone's taking your publishing? Then you have to make a dispute. So you're ASCAP, BMI. What are you?
I'm with BMI.
Okay, so you would contact BMI. And you know how to pull the song up, obviously, so you can see the catalog number on the song.
Yeah.
So you would contact BMI. They have a local office too, and they're pretty helpful. And you would tell them the story. Look, I have a record. It's on Epic Records. It's this artist. Here's the information on it. I need to file a dispute. You ultimately have to send in a written dispute of that, and they would basically freeze everybody until the dispute is settle.
To continue on with the question of streaming, who set the standard for like it was one play would equal 1,500 streams?
I don't really know because the reality is that's what we say, but it's really a complicated equation, and every streaming company is different. So we use that. Everybody sort of uses that, and the record companies say that in our like when I am negotiating a contract for an artist, and they have a paragraph that says once the artist goes gold, his royalty goes up. He sells 500,000 albums, then I will put some language in there that says this many streams equal to one album, right? So similar to what you're talking about. So on paper, that's what it says. But the reality is the formula is not exactly that. So if you look it up, it looks like a math equation that you would do when you were doing calculus or something. Like the way that you figure it out for Spotify is very different from the way that you figure it out for SoundCloud. Is also based on the number of users they have, the number of whether or not those persons are subscribers or whether or not they're watching a commercial, right? Because people pay in different ways. Either you pay because you pay a monthly amount, or you pay because you watch a commercial. Essentially, you pay by doing that. So all those things go into an equation that is very difficult. Also, with YouTube, it's based on the people who are watching. So with YouTube, if all of your watchers are 8 years old, it pays less than if all of your watchers were 26 years old. And so it's a lot to the analytics on that. But we, as an industry, have come up with that as a calculation to use on paper. Does that make sense? Okay.
So that was the end of our questions. Once again, we have to give Vince Phillips another round of applause for his extensive knowledge in the industry. This is great. You guys have learned a lot.
I hope.
For a
Did you guys learn
fraction of what
some
a
good stuff?
consultation could cost.
Okay, so my Instagram is Vince Phillips ESQ. I think that's it.
Yes, that is correct.
And my email address is vincephillips@me.com. And what I'd like you guys to do is go on to WALLAW, www.WALLAW, which is law backwards and forwards, .legal, www.WAWLAW.legal. And right now, just put your email address in there so that I can keep you guys informed on what's going on there and make sure you guys are the first to use the app when it launches very soon.
You should get see if you can get rights to use Future's Magic.
Yeah. Actually, one of my clients produced that track, actually.
Ooh, you gotta make something work. Okay, so now, once again, guys, thank you guys for just contributing all of your energy and questions, etc. We are going to take a group photo selfie. So before we start, sonically superior.